2. Welcome to the July meeting of the Commission on Aging. Thanks for everybody coming today. Allie cannot be with us. She had a mandatory meeting upstate. Beth's here, thanks. Okay. We're hopeful that Terry Wood can come and join us today. She's on our agenda. If she does, we'll look forward to hearing from her. If not, we'll invite her back for another day. Great. Discussion of June minutes. I've got a couple of changes that Gina sent to me, Gina Bloom from our Aging in Place, and those are the following. That she noted that her last name was not included in the others showing up. That Terry Wood's name is misspelled. Okay, and we've done that one too. And then finally, that under old business, her last name was misspelled. So we'll make all of those changes, and we'll go from there. Any other questions, changes to the minutes?
I have one in the reference to the ARP program. It was starting, and it was at the Greenwich Library.
Perfect. Okay, and you've got that one too. Okay.
And I had one.
Yeah.
Starting, not staring.
Okay.
In that same sentence.
Okay, fair enough. So it might be our revised minutes just simply update that sentence. It would probably knock off all of those. Great. Any other questions or changes? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended? Thank you, Ron. Second? Thank you. All in favor? Thanks, everybody. Cool. Abstain? Okay, thank you. One abstention? Okay. There you go. And we'll shoot over to the Mather report. We'll go. Morning, Beth.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. We're having an interesting time with the dredging project out front. I didn't realize that we were going to be crossing guards and protecting agents during this time, but we are. I'll say this publicly, please don't not come to the center. That's a double negative, so come to the center. Because we are, Marcy and I, parking cars if somebody can't walk from the area that they end up parking, especially if they end up on the other side of the building. We are enjoying a good, solid attendance, even though the parking is limited and we're not doing any special events. But all of our regular programming is still going on, and the building is wonderfully air conditioned, and we're having fabulous lunches. I thought that the attendance might be under 100, but it hasn't been. So there's usually at lunchtime, there's a little rock'em sock'em robots out there with the cars, and actually one of the custodial staff from Public Works is helping us as well, because sometimes the tractors have to open that gate and come through, because some of the dredging where they're actually draining the river out is right in front of the building. So it's been, we found other skill sets that we didn't know that we had. And valet parking. Marcy loves high heels, and she's wearing lower heels now. And the fascinating thing is for me to get into a car, and lots of cars start by buttons. And so I have 2 sets of keys. I forgot who they were for. I'm beeping cars to get in.
Wow.
Then I don't realize I have a key that you actually stick in the ignition. So it's been a humbling experience as well.
Have you had to drive stick yet?
I am proficient in stick.
There you go.
Nobody has it so far.
So nobody has stick?
No, well, nobody that I parked so far. None of my valet parking.
Welcome, Terry.
A few of us still
Well,
are.
that's a real driver. Is somebody who's
I
doing
have
that.
missed. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No. Yeah, well, they don't sell a lot of cars now. Don't even
Offer it.
Yeah. Which is, we're a diehard stick fan.
Well, I'm very lucky. I haven't had to park on hills. But, so that being said, we are enjoying good participation, and I want people not to feel that if they come into the parking lot and they feel overwhelmed, just park in front of the door, and we will find a place for your car, and Marcy and I will try to remember where it is by the end of the day, and we'll bring it back. We do return the keys right away. So that is, it's a necessary thing, and it's so nice to see that most people are not complaining at all. They understand it has to be done. We have wonderful support and citizenry here that understands that this is for the greater good of the community. So we're hoping it will be done by the second week of September. Which we'll start planning bigger events again as well. I had the pleasure of going to St. John's yesterday, and I just wanted to mention to the Chat and Chew group, which I think were over 50 people that were there, and I actually still saw some folks that don't know about the center, and don't know what happens at it, which is always surprising but good. So Jerry gave me the opportunity to do it. So I just want you to know, I've spoken to Rotary too. If there's any groups that ever want me to come in, it's my pleasure to do it and to advertise the center and the programs and services that we provide. So I'm there to be on a little speaker train. And also that we will be closed the week of, from Monday, August 19th to Friday, August 23rd, due to maintenance and extensive cleaning. We do this every single year. It's a perfect time, and August, even everywhere in Darien, tends to be a quieter time, so this is the opportunity to do it, and probably will help with dredging a little as well. So that's, oh, and I just want to thank, we're doing a new database program called My Senior Center. We're in the process of training and also putting the data into this database. We have close to 2,000 members now, so we're doing this all between staff and a few volunteers that are helping us. This is going to be allow us to cultivate really good, solid statistics, and so that when we're looking for maybe other programs to be developed or maybe to add part-time staff, that kind of thing, we'll have the actual statistics behind it that we can really clearly speak about what the need is based on an actuary that we do keep statistics. This thing is amazing what it does, because right now we had like 400 people in. We were able to see that we have 25% that are men of the ones that we put in already, which is very high comparatively to other senior centers. So there's all kinds of little neat things that we're going to be able to report on because of moving to this next step. So we're still being trained. We have another 2-hour training on Thursday, and hopefully we'll go live with this within the year. So.
Great. Thank you, Beth. Any questions for Beth? Hearing none, thanks so much. And Allie, as noted, is not here today. She had mandatory training, so we skipped right to Terry. Terry, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming. We look forward to hearing you tell us what's going on with, and beyond all the emails and everything else you send out during the session, when you're live videos, it's great to see you in person.
Ditto, and thank you. It's always good to have a conversation and catch up with what you all are hearing, because I count on what you all are hearing for how I represent you in Hartford too. So that's key. So the first thing is, and then the biggest thing I think, is we preserve the Medicare Savings Plan program. So there were no issues with that. That was a bipartisan agreement that moves forward as it always has. So that's good. I know there was a hiccup about 1.5 years ago. I think I got a question from Joe or Peter on the Department of Aging. Because it's now, the Department of Aging has been eliminated, and I did a little bit of research, and I knew that. I lived so much of this, but it's like studying for the SAT. You know it at the time, right. And then it just sort of becomes part of the history. Basically, the reason the Department of Aging became a separate entity in 2012 was because they wanted to give, one of the reasons was they wanted to give a commissionership to a retired senator, which is fair. She was capable, and that is what it is. And they also felt, many of the advocates felt DSS wasn't as efficient as they could be. So it was a combination of factors that created a separate Department of Aging. And about 25 years ago, there was also a standalone Department of Aging. So it's historical that it kind of comes and goes. It has been rolled into the Department of Rehabilitative Services, acronym DOORS. Amy Porter's the commissioner, and she's terrific. She's boots on the ground, and she's smart, and she's capable and responsive. So that's where Department of Aging is now lodged, or housed, is probably a better term. Because many of the services that seniors require as they age also are similar to someone who has disabilities. So it was felt that was a good place. So the advocates are very happy about that. I don't know, Peter, what you're hearing then.
Well, again, on a personal note, I was not happy with the celebratory note that Governor Lamont said, because again, when you think about it, and you know this, and when it was separate, aging and disabilities, while they come together at some points, they certainly don't come together at all points.
Right.
And disability extends way beyond age, and a lot of aging people are very healthy. And so again, that separation, and I know that's the ideal world when we have a state that has a viable budget and program. Ideally, I think it should be separate as it was before. And again, I would love for us to champion that it becomes separate once again at some point in time, but don't just bring the two together. That's my feelings, and I don't know how the rest of you feel, but certainly as an older person that's, thank God, fairly fit at this point in time, I find it a very
Short-sighted.
short-sighted statement.
Well, especially given the fact that we have such an aging population in Connecticut. In other
Seventh
words,
oldest state in the country.
right. And so at the end of the day, there's so many issues that relate to that, and to the extent that we all know state agencies, they're juggling like mad, right?
Right.
And so this is the kind of thing, long-term basis. How do we plan for seniors, right? That is going to fall to the wayside. It's just the reality. We've got to do this. We got 17 projects today, and number 37 is how do we plan on a long-term basis for our aging population. So number 37 doesn't get looked at, okay? And that's the challenge we see when you do separate them out, because if it was the Department of Aging, likely number one would be how do we plan for the long-term basis. Granted, I'm not
fair.
inside that agency.
No,
I'm just
but
knowing how that goes.
That's, I don't disagree is a funny way to say I agree with what you're saying. And it was done for budget savings. Well, I'm not sure when they consolidate there are any budgets. It's like the regionalization
Right.
efforts. So it may look good. Okay, we're going to combine, but at the end, you really don't save. Do we save money? Do the metrics prove that out? You've made good points. And to your good question a couple of days ago, and I have to give a shout out to both of you, everybody here for all the work they do, but certainly I hear from Joe often, and Peter's terrific. I mean, he does what an advocate should do I can always, in fact, I've got it on my calendar to email Peter beginning of January to say when are we meeting on the AARP agenda, because he always calls with the state director or the state legislative director, and we meet on the issues that are important to AARP during the year. And then you come up a number of times to the Capitol. So I hear that's what a proper advocate would do. And to jump to one of the questions Peter said, think about what we should be doing legislatively. And I would say more advocacy, more organized advocacy throughout the Southwestern Commission on Aging. But we'll get to that. Yes.
Just add something. One of the things that we were looking at in SWACA is that the segment of the population that is growing rapidly and fast, larger, is the old. So that there's folks that are living 90 plus, that children are either gone or not able to interact with them in terms of a caregiving role. And as people live into the state 90 and above and have less personal resource, and this is when they're really going to be more in need. And I have to say that we have some folks in the center that are 95 that, if that's the way I want to be them. Already they're my role models.
Yeah.
But that's not the vast majority of that part of the population. So we're going to see, I think, with Peter's point that we're the 7th oldest state, those are going to be the people that are going to need the resources the most, because they're really not going to have the familial support, and they're probably going to need the more chronic care level in order to have a quality of life. And so it's something new we're looking at too.
I can understand that.
So that's why I'd like to see the Department on Aging restored as the Department
Well,
on
and
Aging.
you know, given the comments here, I will talk to my fellow legislators and say, let's take it let's make it standalone again.
Well, I'd like to know if the departments are merged with rehabilitative services and Department on Aging. Does that mean an older person, say for example myself, who would like to be rehabilitated to go for a more advanced degree, that vocational services or rehabilitative services will pay for my education? Where they might do that with a person with a disability of a younger age. But after 65 or so, they're not really inclined to support an older person for their tuition. So that's kind of a problem when they are combined. so that they wouldn't discriminate against age.
So that would be a benefit for them being combined.
Well, that would say, but I'm not sure that the department, as a merged department, would want to do that because there is age discrimination, that they don't want to, give somebody, a higher education when they're an older person because they don't feel they have those years of work, left. So I'm just concerned or confused about that and what they will do.
So I can check in, that's a great point, I can check into that. NCC does offer lifetime learning opportunities, tuition free, but that's really just sort of one-off courses. But I think that's something we could address possibly locally. It doesn't help the holistic efforts at the state level. So a couple of points to your good thought. We could look at it legislatively next session. Next session is a short session, so we don't get quite as much done. Or maybe it gets pushed off until 2021. But in any event, we can look at putting in language that says you can't discriminate based on age for continuing education tuition.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody here.
Because there shouldn't be age discrimination.
If they have some kind of an accident or, a problem and they want to change careers or need to do something.
Right.
That they were not discriminated against because of their age.
Right, that's a great point. Okay.
Terry, I
Yes.
think an ultimate consequence, if you're not thinking long-term about this, older, is given the proclivity of people wanting in state government to figure out ways to reduce the costs. And typically it's either by eliminating benefits or whatever. I think you're going to start seeing a definitional change. 55 is no longer even considered, it's barely considered middle age, I think, at this point. I think you're going to get to the point where governments are going to start looking at, maybe we need to make the age for qualification 65, not 55, 70, not 65. And if you look statistically, there's reasonable reason to do that. It has changed. So I think long term, that's just kind of a side issue that I think ultimately is going to come out. And the other thing, and I thought Joe expressed this very well before, because there was some rumblings about, maybe we should combine locally, have aging commission combined with the same thing, rehabilitate or disabilities. And Joe's point, which I think is, to me, the crux of the issue, it's a conflict of interest. It becomes a conflict of interest in the sense that we are an advocacy group for a very specific group of people. And it's either going to be represented by, as Joe said, now you're 37th on the list, whereas before you were first. And you are not going to get the same level of representation because the body of people that are in that rehabilitative and disabled pool is so much larger.
And it's very different on a number of levels.
Exactly. So I think it's a legitimate issue, and if anything else, it's for us to make sure that we're able to manage and to ensure that we're not going to put ourselves in a position to be in that conflict. I think it's the wrong direction for us as an advocacy commission.
This is valuable to hear this. So I would assume everyone agrees that if you had a vote on it, Department of Aging should be a standalone agency.
Absolutely.
And not.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think I've got my first bill filed for next year. They haven't opened it up yet, but.
And I'm not suggesting that you have to throw a lot of money at that. You follow me? It's a matter of focus, right? What is this group's focus,
right,
so that we're in a position where, I know the entire world will say, "Oh my God, you're creating another level of state bureaucracy." No, it's a situation if we can keep each group focused on what they do best,
Right.
and obviously there'll be some synergies where they should be talking to each other, but. At the end of the day, my God, if we have such an aging population and we don't have a focus on that, it's just asking for trouble.
And the state had it before, and now we need more. So if it made sense before, it makes even more sense now.
And so again, it's, as you pointed out, You know, but we're really moving like this right now. I mean, you know,
Right.
it would be like taking away children and families when you just had a baby boom, right? you really do need it in 1946.
But we also have a growing population of people with disabilities.
Right.
Of
They need
all
advocacy too,
sorts,
yeah.
And they need advocacy, and they need, you know,
Separate focus on that as well.
so we have only people with physical disabilities or cognitive disabilities or mental health and substance abuse disabilities.
No question.
And Terry, one other point, because you said it, and to me this is a concern, and one way or the other, I think by monitoring it, it would support the idea that, well, maybe it's not such a great idea. Typically, when you combine entities, if you're going to get savings, it's because you've got a bunch of infrastructure and capital things on the ground. Well, this is all people.
Right.
It's all of the budget's going to be salary and wages. And if the effort to save money is that we say somebody, because they're already in this organization, they may not be specifically trained to deal with the aging population, but you know, we'll just fold that in. Typically, you're not going to see any savings, and as a matter of fact, it becomes less efficient.
Well, that's what the consolidation of community colleges and state universities have proven too.
Yes,
We're fighting on that one too.
Yeah.
Great point. Is this something AARP would consider putting on their legislative agenda for 2020?
I have no idea. I haven't brought it up, but I'll talk to Nora
Well, I
about
think
it.
given the strong sentiment and well-articulated reasons to support independent aging, and yeah, you're right. They have. If you're going to continue to support aging, whatever the age level is, it's going to be the same number of people, regardless of. It's not about a building.
Right, exactly.
So, because you have AARP have the infrastructure to move this ball.
I'll talk to her for
Okay.
sure. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so we do have every year, just after the session ends, somebody in the Office of Legislative Research prints out all the bills that we did. And I only laugh because it's, wow, sometimes they come so fast, you just, oh yeah, I remember that one. What was that again? So I can email this to Joe for you all to read, along with the Social Security.
And with your permission, I'd love to be able to put those two documents into our minutes, so I could email them to the secretary. So that way everybody out there in TV land can see them as well.
Right, and you don't have to write all the details
Thank
down,
you.
because it's very detailed, and I've just highlighted, you can see I've just highlighted a couple of sentences, because otherwise we'd be here, somebody would be bringing in lunch, and I know you all have lunch plans. I have lunch plans with you. Okay, so, yes.
And to help you with that, in our minutes for this meeting, Peter broke out 2019 successful efforts and 2019 unsuccessful efforts with each of the bills listed and everything. And I think it might help you, at least from our perspective, because there were so many bills either passed or at least proposed, that this helps you understand these are the things that we think out of all of those bills are important.
Yes, I have some of these
Good.
highlighted, but you write it better than they do.
Yeah, he does.
Well, they AARP didn't.
Well, it's more clear, this is kind of legalese, and it's just sometimes, we love lawyers, but.
Sure you do.
And she said it with a straight face.
I noticed that, absolutely.
We didn't have enough lawyers.
Absolutely.
We
never
just
can
tend
happen.
to, well, the debate's on may or shall, it's like, just pick a word and do it, please. You guys get into which is good, we need that, but then we also need people who are not lawyers to say, let's just keep a focus on the good we want to provide, not get so lost we're gonna run out of time here. Okay, Social Security income, in the 2017 budget, we raised the threshold for deductions, the AGI against your federal, so that, and it takes effect this year. So incomes, $75,000 and less for single filers, $100,000 or less for joint filers qualify for deductions off your federal income tax, and it's a pretty good number. Here's where the weeds get, this is where it's going to be better just to send it to you, because it does phase in from 14% of pension investment and annuity income exempt from income tax, 14% this year, and up to 2025, fully phases in at 100%. So that's good. That's good for seniors. It's when you add up the numbers, it's very helpful. So, elder care workers, databases on providers' background. I think you had this in here too. The new legislation requires the executive director of the Commission on Women and Children and Seniors to provide a portal on the Commission's website that links to publicly available background databases for providers, so that there is still abuse and on various levels with providers, home care providers, and this hopefully will stem some of that abuse, or at least will make people aware of someone they shouldn't be hiring. Long-term care background check program, same thing, same idea. The Department of Public Health administers a background check program for direct care employees and volunteers of long-term care facilities. So it's volunteers and paid employees, which is good. This year, the legislature expanded the list of disqualifying offenses that prohibit someone from being hired, such as an employee or volunteer, to include convictions for specified assault and abuse crimes against the elderly and individuals with disabilities. Non-compete agreements. Now, I know there's some concern with home care agencies on this particular legislation. A new law prohibits contracts for homemaker, companion, or home health services from including a covenant not to compete. So they feel that some of these home care agencies feel when they've taken the time to take someone on and invest time to train them and educate them and vet them, for them to be able to go somewhere else. Now, I don't know the timing details of this, but I think that's the home care agency. If they've taken the time to invest in someone, there should be some commitment from that employee. So that did pass. I know there's concern about that. It's probably something we will be revisiting next year. And that does happen with a small percentage of bills every year where unintended consequences, we end up having to tweak the language in some way. Facility closures, and I don't know how much that affects down here. But by law, nursing homes, rest homes, residential care homes, and certain other facilities generally must apply to the Department of Social Services to terminate a service or decrease their bed capacity. Otherwise, they have to maintain the bed capacity. So it keeps them from trying to capitalize, monetize these nursing homes when it could compromise an individual's care. So it's a safety precaution built in. So the new law allows those facilities to submit a petition for closure to DSS and allows the department to authorize the closure if certain requirements are met. So it streamlines that ability. I would say it's less bureaucratizes it. It streamlines it. Enough said. Under healthcare and insurance, and I was a co-sponsor of this legislation because I heard from a couple of constituents on this. And again, I can't emphasize enough how helpful it is to have this dialogue here and also to hear from you on an individual basis on legislation, because there is so much that comes forward to us. In any given year, I think there are 3,000 bills that are introduced, and you can't possibly read through them all. So I learn about it when a constituent, other than the bills I've introduced, I learn about it when a constituent emails me and says, please support this, or can you help me with this? This one is specifically about Alzheimer's and dementia. It's a new law that modifies continuing education requirements for physicians and nurse practitioners concerning Alzheimer's and dementia and other related cognitive impairments, including geriatric depression. So it require nurses and doctors, nurse practitioners and doctors to have continuing education requirements in this area, which is good. Also along that, in that same legislation, And all the legislation in this document that you'll get emailed, the legislation, all you have to do is click on the little blue number. It says, this one says PA 19, which is the year 19, and then the bill number 115, which means it's the 115th bill the governor signed. You click on that link, it takes you directly to the legislation with all the details. I mean, who voted when and when it was put forward, and it's pretty amazing. I hope it's confidence inspiring that there's a due diligence and a due process to all the work we do. Sometimes not, but overwhelmingly it is so. So this also creates a task force, that same bill creates a task force on Alzheimer's and dementia to determine gaps in implementing the recommendations and make recommendations for best practices. So that's something that's important, certainly for that population, because that's also increasing. Insurance coverage for hearing aids, and I didn't think this would have been a no-brainer, but we had to put it in the statute. Health insurance policies to cover hearing aids for any covered person regardless of age. Duh. It's like,
For a lot of us from the 80s, though, we had a lot of rock concerts, so probably the insurance comes in, oh, come on.
I know. Well, and I know a number of whom served in the Vietnam era, whether in Vietnam or were ready to go to Vietnam, and in armored tanks and gun ranges without air protection, and same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Patients' rights, community ombudsman program, and that's also on your sheet. The new law requires the state long-term care ombudsman and the DSS commissioner of Department of Social Services to direct a community ombudsman program to investigate complaints concerning care received by DSS administered home and community-based services. So, again, that's something that I'm surprised we had to put in the statute, but we did, so that's good. Then things that Peter suggested in your email a couple days ago. You said, what would you do to further the legislative, I can't remember the exact words.
My question to Terry was, I said I'd like to ask this question at our commission
and that's
meeting.
bring it on me.
But if you had an opportunity, for example, to address all the commissions of aging in this state, as you do us, what one or two things would you encourage us as bodies to do?
So I've written down 6 things, but they're more specific.
Okay.
Globally, I would say create an organization to advocate for legislation you care about. Because we listen, when I get emails, even 10 emails or 5 emails, and they're simply written, and by simply I mean no more than 2 paragraphs and short sentences, because we do get a fair number of emails, and just a couple of sentences why this is important, why it makes sense. You can go into greater detail, but it's just because of the volume we get, most of the things can be expressed pretty simply. And the other one is, and this isn't so much just specific to aging, but we need to do a better job with financial literacy across the spectrum, from 16-year-olds to 96-year-olds. I think the financial literacy piece paralyzes people regardless of age. Paralyzes people, and when you feel in command of your finances, you have confidence. So I think those are the 2 overwhelming pieces, because it is a financial reality that 95-year-olds are probably going to be out of funding. They've lived past what they thought they would. And how might you prepare for that so that doesn't happen? Or mitigate that, at least. The other things I thought about were financial literacy. Include in the budget, we need to have more access for home health care and continue to support people living at home, which I think Darien does such a magnificent job between Beth, what you do, and at home in Darien. I think this town is blessed to have tremendous volunteers and 2 organizations who are supporting this community with all their hearts and resources. There's also legislation that was put forward 2 years in a row, and I've got to track it. I've got to find out where it is because I think it has tremendous value. EMTs, they were going to do a trial program in Stanford, and we're part of Stanford, right? We've got Stanford paramedics now. And our EMT director is Stanford EMS deputy director. The EMTs in this pilot program would check in on seniors who were recently discharged from the hospital. So it accomplishes two things. It touches base with them. And certainly, Jen, this is your bailiwick and your area of expertise. When seniors are discharged from the hospital, the readmit rate is much higher than it should be. And having an EMT come in their downtime, obviously, or a paramedic come into the home and have a home visit and say, how are you doing with your meds? How are you feeling? Are you eating properly? Just those touch points, and then you can come back to you and say, so-and-so on such and such street is having a hard time navigating the stairs, so it creates a connection and a safety net for these people. So I will find out where that program is because I think that's a brilliant program, and EMTs do have a fair bit of downtime. And I know a number of, certainly what they call the day ladies, the adult volunteers in Post 53, a number of them would be interested in this. So I will find out where that is.
Is there any advantage of the EMT doing that versus nurse going in and doing a follow-up for home care? Many people are discharged with nursing at the VNA or another nursing agency. So would that be a duplication of services, or would be one over the other?
Good question, and that's what the pilot program presumably would, but that's good because I can bring that and highlight that question. They are discharged, but I don't believe, unless I'm unaware of it, that there is a follow-up nursing visit. So it would be in place of, and it would be covered, it would be a fee that's already covered because the EMTs are on duty. And it's in their time when they're not on
and
call.
Would that be paid by the EMT or their service, or would the client or patient be expected to pay for that visit?
No, that's my understanding.
So it would be a free visit.
That's my understanding. Again, it's a pilot program, so there are the details to be worked out. But my understanding is it's primarily to make sure these people don't get readmitted to the hospital and start that cycle of in and out of the hospital, because that's when their health starts to deteriorate.
And they might also need to make a referral to a nursing agency.
Correct.
That's necessary.
It's almost like a friendly visitor to come in. But I know part of it was the EMTs do have a fair bit of downtime, and this would be an effective use of their time in a field in which they're qualified. But we'll find out. I'd love to come back in January to hear what I'll do is I'll present what I've introduced, and certainly I've already got a couple that are going in the file.
You're on.
And I will have had our meeting. And then I can hear final thoughts, or maybe February, or
whichever
whatever
you prefer.
Okay.
And they make sure that the senior in question who's going to receive these visits is aware that the EMTs are coming
Of
and everything. I would
course.
just think it might
Correct.
freak out a senior to see an ambulance show up
Right.
at their house.
Right, but that's where we need to understand the details and where
Yeah.
it's gone, because everybody's enthusiastic about it.
And they should have also the right to refuse if they don't want to have a home visit.
Absolutely.
Terry, would the EMTs, would they take blood pressure and that kind of thing, or would it just be I'm sorry, let me rephrase that.
I don't know.
No, let me rephrase this. Is it something that could be expanded? I mean,
Yes.
my question would be eventually, when you get the details, is this expansive into a volunteer-friendly visitor program and not just EMTs?
That's a possibility. I mean, I
Because
think it's
that's
all
what I'm
just-
asking about.
right,
What's the
right.
level of expertise
Right.
that's needed? So maybe, I don't know.
I think this is where we need a medical professional and someone.
I think whoever goes has to have something medically in the background to ask the right questions. What you don't want is readmissions because they're very costly. They don't want them. The insurance companies don't want them. But a lot of patients come back because they really don't need to come back. They just need somebody to reassure them that they don't need to go back. And to determine that, you have to have some kind of a background to determine that. I mean, you can't just, I think it's very important. I think it'd be a great program. We don't spend enough time with the patients because we don't keep them anymore.
Yeah.
Can't teach them, we don't have the teaching time. Everybody used to stay in a week or 10 days, now they stay in 2 days if they're lucky. And you can't do the appropriate amount of teaching. Post-op teaching is teaching, so we're not given that kind of time. So this might make a very good, this would be great because, like I said, I think probably 60% of your readmissions are not necessary.
Oh.
They're psychologically necessary for the patient, but if they're reassured that they're okay and that they don't particularly need to come back, that's all they need. You know, they just need to be told they're okay.
But that to me, that goes beyond the scope of an EMT, where it's just not medical. It is, you know, social support and the other kinds of things in the person's life and situation. So, you know, social services,
Well, I think your EMTs are pretty qualified to rule out. So in other words, if they went, they would be suspicious that something truly was not right, which then they could refer to somebody else. I agree, I think it'd probably be great to have a nurse or whoever, but the EMTs are pretty bright. They're pretty savvy as far as, and your paramedics are excellent.
Mm-hmm.
So it just is a matter of somebody sort of ruling out something that you see isn't right. And they can do that. They can they can be scripted. They're scripted anyway. They can be scripted to ask the appropriate questions. And then if they don't like what they hear, or they go back and somebody says, I'm not too sure about this, you can follow that up. You know, I just think it's a great program to have somebody see these people. I do, for a lot of reasons.
Terry, there's another piece to this. When you get discharged from a rehab facility, this is Medicare mandate, you, for 2 weeks, the facility itself will offer the nursing to go in, maybe a little bit more rehab in the house, a little more PT or OT in the house, to make sure the person is adjusted and is doing fine from the care that they give. If that person goes back into that rehab facility within the 2 weeks, there's a Medicare fine that the facility and the hospitals many moons ago, because I'm dating myself, when the discharge planners used to be very active about placing people back, the same thing would happen. If somebody had to go back into the hospital for 7 days, and the hospital itself would not get full reimbursement back from Medicare. So there's that piece of it as well. You know, now the rehab facilities, that's what they have to do. It's mandated for them to do, and they're seeing less hospitalizations and readmissions back to rehab because of that. So if there's a piece of that they say the EMT goes in and does an evaluation and sees a problem, and that piece of it occurs back to the hospital, that person has to go back. You know, there might be some legislation that involves Medicare in the reimbursement of it, because Medicare, that streamlines, that's the financial piece, but it's also a quality of life thing. I get with several now personal experiences with elderly parents and in-laws. That's the thing that's giving them, when they leave the rehab, giving them the ability to get home and be safe home. That 2 weeks is, and it's also 2 weeks that's good for the caregivers to make sure the house is set. Because to Christine's point, the person could be rehabbed to the level that they can be, but when they get home, it's a whole nother McGillen. So, you know,
especially with all the safety things at home, the tub things and loose carpets have to be taken up and rails and
handrails and all that. So just careful.
Yeah, I was thinking, you know, like you were saying, the friendly visitors, or besides the people go in that have the medical background. But even like in the churches, they have these Stephen Ministry. And I remember St. John's had Stephen Ministry. And
we did at St. Thomas More too.
And that was really very helpful.
Yeah.
a lot of people don't want to say what's going on, and everybody's so private. But once they get these friendly volunteers, like I'm sure you have at home in Darien, that go in, and all they go in is like to talk to them, and beside, not medical, but how many of these seniors are really lonely,
Yes.
and they get depressed. The families aren't paying attention because they think mom's home and she's doing what she's doing and she's fine. But when you get these volunteers that go in that can help with that, like I remember I visited a woman, I mean, she was in such a state of depression, but just that one-on-one once a week, whether it was a half hour, whether it was an hour, 20 minutes, it made such a difference for them to, the following week to know, or the week after, that somebody was coming in.
Right.
And then if I saw that depression was really bad, then I would have to go to the pastor and say, this lady really needs more than what we're giving her. She needs the medical assistance. And I think that really, that
Makes
helps
a
too.
difference.
It does make a difference.
Well, we're hardwired to connect.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
psychologists will tell you we all want to connect, and
But,
that's,
that makes an interesting thing I haven't thought, because, if somebody's in a severe depression, they may need medical attention.
Right.
But that liability ought not to fall on a friendly visitor.
No.
But it would be good maybe if there was a pairing, somebody as a friendly volunteer, go with a medical person,
Right.
at least at the beginning, and then take over by the friendly volunteer, maybe afterwards if they don't need that kind of medical support. But they would need an assessment by a professional if they're in a very severe state
Well,
of
that's why
depression.
when you visit, you can actually tell you can see how deep that depression could be. That as a friendly visitor, that elderly person needs more than just me visiting.
Right, exactly.
But it's funny because there are people that are like 95 years old in our community, and they will say, and I'm sure Beth will agree, all my friends are dead.
yes.
And they want to make new friends. And then who do they come to? They come to us. And it's like a spark goes off in their minds that they're so happy that somebody's paying attention to them. So I think that's
Important
really,
piece.
it is.
This is reminding me of, there's also, I think from last meeting in June, I think it was Ally's report, that there's been an uptick in police, and Beth, you probably know better than I, there's been an uptick in the police department in Darien being called about elderly people who need potentially assistance with things, or the police having to get involved and check on those people. So that's sort of reminding me of all of this as being part of sort of a greater issue.
And is that still part of the protective services for the elderly? They still have that department in place?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, they definitely do. And the
Yeah,
other
makes deferrals
key,
regularly.
another piece of legislation not related specifically to aging, we did pass, I think it was a year or 2 years, 2 sessions ago, mental health first aid requirements for first responders. And is of course being given August 1st in Greenwich to any first responder. And it's really how to identify on the fly where someone's mental health state is. And I'm going to be there for a good part of the day just to further understand it. And I will be sponsoring, along with Post 53, a mental health first aid training for Darien, September 27th. And details on that will go out. It won't be first responder mental health first aid, but it will be mental health first aid. How to identify mental health situations. Sometimes they're so subtle, we don't realize when someone has slipped into it and what we can do about it. It's a layman's program. It's a full-day program. Lunch is provided. And it's just a very good primer on mental health.
Terry, we only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to move into different subjects, what I'll call a firing round on the future of Connecticut legislation. Okay?
Oh, I don't get to leave.
No, you don't get to leave yet. Okay. My question is, and because all these affect seniors at
Yes.
some level, even
Yeah.
though they're much broader. And my question to you is, future of tolls, be my first one, 30 seconds on what you think is going to happen.
Say that again?
Trucks only.
30 seconds, okay. what I think is going to happen, or where I stand on it, or where both. Okay. Conceptually, I think most people understand the need for tolls. Most states have them, which is, it's like, well, so-and-so has candy, why can't I have candy? But it's not quite the analogy, but it's similar. I think there are a lot, so Governor Lamont wants tolls. We do need to fix our infrastructure, there's no question. The concern many of us have, and enough Democrats that they haven't been able to pass it.
Mhm.
So it is a bipartisan opposition at this point. And I'm careful to say at this point because I believe we do need to find a solution and there is a middle ground for it. But when we do things in the budget, and the majority party in the budget this year, they put a new tax on used cars. So when you trade in your car, you're gonna pay you're gonna pay a tax on that when you buy a used car. I'm not saying that right. It was a $172 million revenue line that should have gone to the special transportation fund, but no, they allocated it to the general fund. Well, when you have majority party rule who's making those decisions, why are we going to vote in tolls when we're not using the money we are getting efficiently and respectfully? So that was a little longer than 30
I'm wondering
seconds.
though your future on it. I mean, will we see the tolls in the 2020s one way or another?
I think we will.
Okay, fair
I
enough.
think we will.
Right,
And I
we're-
think it's logical, but we have to earn the respect of the public
Mhm.
that we are we are respecting the hard-earned tax money they're sending into the state. We're not doing that right.
Well, no, go ahead.
Yeah, as far as the elderly population really growing in this state, that may be burdensome on the elderly,
Correct.
the drivers.
Right.
And I agree, that with Jim, that, trucks only or something like that, they're,
So here are a couple of details. Great point. Trucks already pay a fee. The revenue line for trucks in Connecticut is between $130 and $150 million a year. Quarterly, they have a little gizmo on their trucks, and quarterly they pay a mileage fee to the state of Connecticut through IAWTRA or something. And it's all very, they can't beat the system. And so we already are collecting tolls revenue from trucks. There would be gantries. There are some people who are who are technologically savvy and say, well, by the time the gantries are up in 4 to 5 years, and that's how long, if we voted tomorrow on tolls, it would take 4 to 5 years to get the gantries and the whole system up. And there are people who say, well, in 4 to 5 years, the technology is going to change and we're not going to need the gantries. So
Right.
these are all the things, I'm giving you the deep inside color.
Yeah.
The other point to know is there is agreement on if and when tolls come in, that there will be a toll for out-of-state residents. They pay full boat, and it will be through whether it's Easy Pass or those technological choices and decisions have to be made. In-state residents will have a discount. If you are an in-state resident commuting regularly, you will pay even less. So there will be 3 tiers and the toll, as it's been proposed so far, it would be 91, 95, the Merit, and 84. Thank you.
and maybe they could add the elderly on a fixed income.
Great point. Great point.
Need to get around still.
There was an article in this Advocate this morning, which is why I said
Yeah.
trucks only, that basically says that's, at least the person writing that article basically said pretty much they think, he thought that was the way it was going to go.
Well, there's federal restrictions too that you can't, and I can get the details on it. There are federal restrictions to just tolling trucks.
Yep.
So we won't be reimbursed the federal dollars that we're not getting now, quite frankly, as much as we have the lowest reimbursement for federal transportation dollars of any state in the country.
But the way we already have a system in place. You don't have to put a gantry up or anything. All you have to do is increase what you're charging that you're already tracking trucks with. You don't need gantries or anything. You just take the existing mechanism, which if I were looking for an easy out,
Right.
because like you said, it's going to be 5 years, and it's a really serious issue about the technology change.
Yes, and it's also a serious, significant issue that we've got to keep up with our infrastructure
Yeah.
here. I mean, it's,
Are we
and
sure
also
this-
the toll, one last question, one last point. The toll money collected would also not support Metro North. That funding collected from tolls couldn't go for Metro North.
That was my question.
Yeah.
Are you confident that the toll money is going to be spent on this pier structure?
No, I'm not. That's
Right.
why at this point I am a no on tolls. But I'm careful to say at this point.
So that's the big elephant in the room.
For me, yes.
Yeah, and it should be. That should be
Right, we haven't been
something that
responsible.
comes first before
Right.
a
No,
yes or no.
I should have known better than my lightning round would get through one question. Nevertheless,
Well, we do have special session on Monday, so we're gonna be in Hartford on Monday. I don't think I know Governor Lamont, and he's done some very good things. I think he's a good person, and he wants to do the right thing for the state. I didn't agree with all his decisions this year.
so what will the topics be at the special session?
Special
Not
session, because we thought we'd be coming back in for tolls.
Okay.
We didn't vote on the bonding package.
Okay.
So we have to vote on the bonding package. And he vetoed 3 bills that were unanimous bills in both the House and the Senate. So we're like cranky people.
Override! Fair enough.
All in good spirit.
Terry, thanks so much for
You're welcome.
coming. We
Thank
really
you, guys.
appreciate it.
This
Absolute
was-
great.
Well, it's huge for me because it gives me feedback.
Joe, it also raises, I think, a very important thing for our commission to consider. We're blessed or challenged or benefit that we have 4 representatives in the state legislature. And I think we ought to reach out and get Matt Blumenthal,
Sure.
Senators Carl Leone, and Senator Duff in here, and really make this a deliberate effort on going forward. And really we'll begin to address Terry's first recommendation, that we become perhaps more of an advocate of legislation we feel important for us.
I think that's a topic for September that we can talk about that question. I would encourage those who are interested predominantly, and I would say Peter is certainly number 1, on whether there's a subcommittee within this group. In other words, Peter and I have a slight difference of opinion, to be blunt. I think our commission needs to be focused primarily locally. I think Peter moves it more to the state level. So I think that's a September question. I think we should be talking about that, absolutely, and how we do that. And so, but we'll let you go. We know you have a busy day. Thank you so much.
Terry will be at the senior center today
Woohoo!
at 12:30.
Yes.
That's
Presentation.
awesome.
So
I will just
you guys
say.
continue. And they never let her leave either.
All right.
You guys,
Great,
thanks.
thank you.
Yes.
Don't worry, we're going to do it. Okay, so I have gotten some notes here. So is there any old or new business? Hearing none, can I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you coming.